by the way. I just like, that's one of my greatest sources of anger, is how often people of color are expected to do so much unpaid work, and it's criminal. Yeah, so the tendency to perpetuate these white supremacy patterns is so great, and King talked about that, about lamenting white moderates, you know, and I too really, that's one of the things that really keeps me up at night, is the historic and current pattern of white moderation. I mean, this is like a prime state for, well, no, this is not white moderate land. This is white supremacy land, big time. But a lot of people who kind of claim that identity of I'm, yeah, anti-fascist actually. But just, yeah, that moderate sort of stance of, I had a white friend of, well, he was a white friend of about 20 years and a colleague, and he told me that this wasn't his style of activism, right? And I said, what does that mean? Like visibility? You're not wanting to be visibly active and disruptive. So anyway, I guess asking questions continues to be a source of grounding. How can I help? How can I support your efforts? That's what I want to continue to ask. So I'm reminded then of Amanda Gorman's inaugural poem. Again, it's called The Hills We Climb, and it starts with a question. When day comes, we ask ourselves, where can we find light in this never-ending shade? That's the first line in her poem. And yesterday in Cyberfort, while discussing her poem, the kids, and then the kids developing poetry, they shared their works. We considered asking good questions as a powerful part of writing, and by extension, I would say a powerful part of being in solidarity with one another. So the question that surfaced for me during that time with the littles was, how do we meet our nation at its truth, at its awful, genocidal, stolen, violent, unpromising truth, and yet in a democracy? How do we meet all of that and move forward? And my thoughts, even though they're a lot more complex after today, so I will do a lot more thinking and writing, but my thoughts rested with this idea of togetherness through proximate work, through trust building, and trust building takes so much time. I don't expect to ever fully earn trust, given my ancestry, and but that is as it should be, and should make me work harder. So through trust building, that takes time, stamina, honesty, mistakes. I appreciate how, when I make mistakes, the deep relationships I'm developing with my sisters allows them to give me grace. Well, give me a head bump first, but give me grace and love, and so the ability to make mistakes together, give each other grace, keep learning, forming real relationships through fierce love, through unyielding daily efforts. But I also am continuing to think a lot about the one of the last thoughts I had was doing this work together, but I also want to be really respectful of what I heard today, which is leave us alone. And I think both things can be true, right? That it's a paradox, alone together. Maybe that's it. Alone, fighting to be alone together.
Autonomy.
I don't know. I got to think on that. But thank you for stimulating so much thought and for the honor and being able to say some words. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Sarah, and thank you for your leadership and your support. If we had just a few hundred more co-conspirators like you, we wouldn't have to stand out here and speak these kind of words. So, thank you. Next, I'd like to introduce a man I just gotten to know and getting to know every little day a little more, Jason Whitmer. Jason has been impacted by the system all his life, and he's fell into much of the destructive thinking and behavior that helped cause ruin to many communities. And now he's doing his best to be a voice to the voiceless and to join us in our mission to unify and heal our communities. With that, I want to please give a warm welcome to Jason Whitmer. Thank you for being here.
Because I think we do have a lot to think about from what was said today. A lot. And I do want to say I'm not opposed. I hope this don't sound like leave us alone to me means autonomy, a voice for ourselves. And I think that's where sometimes we mistaken where we're trying to get at. The Black community says, hey, we need allies. It's saying that part of our problem, a huge part of our problem, is we don't have our own voice that steps forward. And so we lose that accountability. And that happens with all communities. We lose that sense of self to be able to not only be accountable for ourselves, but to get to know ourselves. But I just come up here to speak a little bit on our prison system, because that is a paradox too of treating people like people, even when people have done horrible things. And that's many of us that were in our system have done horrible things to others. However, I don't know if there's ever a time to dehumanize people. Ever. And I know, without a doubt, that when you do so, you perpetuate that behavior and thinking to continue in the communities inside and out. I've come out changed because men inside decided to be human and to invest in me and others as humans. Now, with that said, 2020 for me was an interesting year, but it wasn't completely unusual, except for the fact that the rest of society seemed to join in on what my whole life has been, and many other people I know have been pepper sprayed, maced, beat up by the police, separated, alone, wearing many masks throughout our life. All this stuff is unusual. George Floyd was a tragedy, but it's a terrible thing to say, but it was a good thing, because I say this on the basis of George Floyd is not a solo event, but his event seemed to put a face on something that was lacking. And last year I seen many developments that sometimes I think we miss. And one of the biggest developments that I think will bring some of the biggest change. Nobody gets upset for me saying this, but it's this white community that started educating themselves on white supremacy, educating themselves on what colonism actually is, what the detrimental of this white supremacy actually is. It's not a word of we are better, but it's a word of like how we can get more and how we can have all this power and how this is so detrimental. And I'm seeing these, and I'm involved in several communities, several organizations, I should say, and I'm seeing groups come together to do studies, groups come together to say, how can we dismantle this? Groups come together to say, how can we do this detrimental that we're doing to society, how can we disperse this and put this to rest? Because, as I said, autonomy is a voice for ourselves, and in the white community, autonomy also means accountability for ourselves. Starting to change this, and we're seeing this. So you that stand out here, you are not our enemies, especially since you stood here and heard the words that many people, we just can't accept words that hurt our feelings and seem to undermine our values and seem to undermine who we thought we was at our whole life. That was something that was really hard for me to do, find my change inside, because I was a solid, hardcore gangster, and that's just how it was. I kept my loyalties, and people started undermining these values and, realigning, this is what your loyalty, which is only destructive to everybody else. I'm like, no. This is community. This is the hood. And that's not true. And I'm not going to go deeper into that. I just want to say this. So, the prison system, because that's what I'm up here to speak about. We're about to have a push for a new prison based on our old prisons are crumbling, based on our population is overcrowded in the prison, based on we need punishment for those who have done harm. And I know I'm speaking to the choir, but more prisons is what we do. This is the success of our society. Another bigger prison. Somehow our system is working. Does anybody believe our system is working? No. Are we incarcerating ourselves out of a society that's out of this little community here in Nebraska that's so crazy, so murderous, that we have to have twice as many people in the prison now? We just got Tecumseh, the biggest prison we have in the state, in 2001 opened, and built that in a couple of years. Nobody can explain why the purge wasn't happening all the years before this, yet somehow we're continuously justified. So we need your voices to speak against this continuous incarceration. This is not a voice that says the harm that was done by individuals was not done, that says the people who have suffered harm are somehow belittled. This is one that speaks on the human element, the hard decisions, the hard positions where it says we got to do certain things that don't look good to the overall masses of this sheep mentality, but it does good for the long term. So for me personally, seeing community, seeing people come together, that gives me motive to continue to try to do better with myself, to try to rethink of how some of my old behaviors that come up and some of my old mentalities that come up, to rethink that before I step back into them behaviors. Ernest Jackson, look him up if you haven't heard of him. He's not just somebody that I would like to see go home. He's the example of what is wrong with our system. Not just an innocent man in prison. He's an example of what's wrong with our system. For a crime that somebody else confessed to and was acquitted of, meaning it wasn't a crime, and he's still in prison 20 years later, he's an example of what our system is doing. So I don't want to be a lone voice getting a few people coming, because people keep like, your voice did this. My voice didn't do this. They did this. We should hear everybody in Nebraska bringing up Ernest Jackson. That's an example of the system. Hill. And our job bringing up his voice, a life lost, is to save the voices of those who are still alive. Ernest Jackson is still alive. We don't honor the dead by forgetting those who are alive. And that's why we keep speaking about Ernest Jackson, not because of exclusion of anything else, but he's an example of what's wrong with our system, and we can save a life. Thank you.
Thank you for continuing to remind us about Ernest Jackson and about our duty to help those who are wrongfully incarcerated and shouldn't be there in the first place. We need to keep speaking out on the issue. I want to thank my friend Lou Bratz here for holding this sign for me that I brought, Justice for Zachary Bearhills. While it's important that we continue to fight for justice for Zachary Bearhills, who got no justice on the streets of Omaha, it's also important that we remember that there are other people like Micah Taylor, a young Santee Sioux man who was pulled over by an officer in Omaha, shot in the back of the neck, and after he was shot, he drove away. Later, he got 50 years in prison for that. He's sitting in a penitentiary here in Nebraska, and he still has that bullet in his neck, you know. He's looking at 50 years. This is about a 19-year-old man, Native man. We have to remember Micah Taylor. We have to remember Ernest Jackson. These are men who had their whole lives taken from them because the white system decided that they needed to bury the truth. They needed to bury their own mistakes. So, thank you for that. I appreciate that, Jason, so much. Next, I'd like to introduce our keynote speaker for today, a good friend of mine, Renee Sansosi, somebody who I've grown to respect so much these past few years. Renee holds a degree in education from the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. Of course, she's an Omaha woman and a practitioner of traditional healing. Renee combines her life experiences with a learning process that helps learners to engage in their own cultural identities and language. She has been a teaching artist with the Leeds Center for Performing Arts since 2009. She has presented at numerous conferences and workshops on various topics related to Native science, history of Indian education, Native languages, poetry, and sustainability. Last year, she was featured in the PBS American Masters series Unladylike 2020, Suzanne LaFleche-Bacote, the first American Indian doctor. She was also a finalist for a 2020 Inspire Awards celebrating women leaders in Lincoln, Nebraska. Please give a warm welcome to our very own Renee Sansosi.
Well, good afternoon again. Ewe the Wongide, all my relations. Let's give a hand to everyone who spoke earlier, please, you know. And also thank you to everyone who has remained here during this, you know, time with icy cold, and, you know, we've got all these hecklers driving around and trying something that most of us have dealt with all our lives in one form or another. I wanted to begin, you know, what I had by saying that, you know, just as what some of the speakers had said before, I speak from the heart, and in all my presentations, I hardly have anything written out. I always have an outline. My outline is something that then just gives me a reminder, this is already information that's stored up here in my mind, you know, from years and generations and so forth. So the fight is not over. We are still here. This is something the Nebraska Turtle Heart Society had discussed. I don't know when, must have been about 2 months ago, you know, after Biden was elected. And the Nebraska Turtle Heart Society formed, I would say, somewhere in September, but actually it was something that was already in progress, I would say, especially right after the murder of George Floyd. It kind of brought us back to a place of we had to decide what we were going to do once and for all. Literally, that's kind of what it came to. Because just as I've heard speakers say before, you know, so many of us have, you know, either gone underground, you know, that we've kind of like, you know, we've kind of hidden ourselves away because we were tired. And all the rallies in the world cannot describe how tired we are. I looked at something in this past year after we formed the Nebraska Turtle Heart Society. I did a little research and I looked back into my own childhood and I looked at the photos I found through the Daily Nebraskan as well as through the Lincoln Journal Star, what it's called now. But these photos were ones of my mother and my aunties standing on the Capitol steps back in the 70s. There was even a photo I found of myself as a child, about 11 maybe, and I was holding a sign that said, "The United States is Indian country." And then I remembered that day and I thought, yeah, I remember holding that sign and marching from the university and coming here to the Capitol. All the rallies in the world that we've had since who knows when, I guess since colonization of the United States, as they call it, but of Turtle Island. All the rallies of the world, and we're still doing this shit. We still have to stand here and speak about what's happening, what has happened, what we want to see change. This presidency isn't going to change anything. We know that already. We've seen it. We've witnessed it. But what I want to say is, I'll quote some of my relatives, Native and non-Native. And when the Nebraska Turtle Heart Society formed, we looked at all of these things. We had these discussions together. What do we call ourselves? What are we going to do? But it always came back to who we were, who we are. What do we stand for? We stand for sovereignty. We stand for native languages. We stand for nonviolence. We stand for sobriety, as we call it. And we're a society, what the Lakotas call Okola Kichie. That translation is very powerful. It means we're something more than just some club or association. We're standing on an altar, in other words. This altar is one of truth. This is what each one of us have. We walk with that truth. Some of us are pipe carriers. As pipe carriers, we're expected to live by truth. We can't hide from it. We have to exemplify that. We embody that. If we don't live by that truth, who do we answer to? Not to this white government. We answer to the Creator and to our ancestors. They carry more weight for us and our responsibilities than any institution can ever do for us. So I'm going to quote someone here about this whole Make America Great campaign that was, we were subjected to. When America was great, the waters ran pure. When America was great, there were over 8,000 strains of indigenous corn. This was a quote from Winona LaDuke during one of her speeches. And right now, Winona is fighting one of these fights against that pipeline, Line 3, up there, up in northern Minnesota there. And I was up there last month and got to participate in a water ceremony that they had there. And got to see some of the grandmothers that I admire who helped me to shape who I am now today as a matriarch. when America was great, we called it Turtle Island. Turtle Island was filled with our gardens, our medicine, our food. We knew what we were doing. We knew every inch of this land. We love this land. What was so hard about everything that happened to us was that we were separated from the land. No longer could we care for the land the way our ancestors had done. This is what nearly destroyed us. And I'm going to talk about Bruce Lee. I don't know if anybody, who's all Bruce Lee fans here? Okay? I grew up on Bruce Lee. That was like one of my heroes, you know? And the reason why I'm talking about Bruce Lee is because of what he was trying to teach. His philosophy. He believed everybody should have an understanding of his philosophy. He had to fight to defend that right to teach. You know, to nearly losing his life to teach everybody. That philosophy he talked about has to do with water. And what he encouraged his students to do was to be like water. Be like water, then you can do anything, accomplish anything. And in a way, I guess you could say that our ancestors had these same teachings. We understood what it meant to be like water because we're made of water, just like Mother Earth. Everything that Mother Earth is, this is what our bodies are. Everything. The Earth, you look at the globe, it has 2 hemispheres, right? And then you look at ourselves, we have our brain, 2 hemispheres. You have all these rivers, and then in our bodies, all these veins. We are like water, just like Bruce Lee said. I have a book here I want to show you. I'm a teacher. This book is called We Are the Water Protectors. This woman, Carol Lindstrom, I was at a conference in 2017 in New York City at the New York Times building. I was there with all of these writers of color, of children's books. All of us who are writers, Indigenous, African American, Latino, as they say, we were there together. Carol Lindstrom was one of the writers that was there. And she was talking about her work. I'm glad I got to meet her and spend a little time with her, because now I see the fruition of her work. It's encouraging for me because I too want to share my children's stories. That's going to happen. I know that. That will happen. So the first line in her book, We Are the Water Protectors, she says, water is the first medicine. Water is the first medicine. That's what we need to survive more than anything else, just as air. And I have a representation of water here in this cup. Water is so sacred. It takes in everything we're saying, and it will keep it in that memory that it holds. That's how sacred water is to us. I wanted you to hear that. That we as Native women, this was our responsibility to take care of the water. I never called myself a water protector because that seemed, I don't know, it didn't seem right to me. When I started on my spiritual path to become a Medewan, to become a Shaw woman, that was the first thing they taught us, was how to take care of the water. So that's how I saw myself. I take care of the water. Not just as a water protector, which became popular from Standing Rock, but to take care of the water, to honor it as sacred, and to hold those water ceremonies. That's how I saw myself. It wasn't a political slogan. It's something I live by every single day. Spirituality, our beliefs as women, that's what I believe in. A lot of teachings go with that. Water is the first medicine. Our ancestors knew what it meant. I'm going to go on to this next one. Our ancestors knew what it meant to be a warrior. And there is a distinction here about what that means. And I think, again, Chanupa made that distinction about the Akichita and about the other Chlete. When I became a warrior woman, that wasn't something I sought out or asked for. That came through fasting. That came from the spirits. They're the ones who designated that and said that that's what I was. And when I was told that after I fasted, this was in 2005, I resisted it. I was like, how can that be? What do they mean? Why are they telling me that? I'm an Omaha woman. We're not supposed to be warriors, because that's what I was conditioned to believe. So I had to learn, and I had to find my teachers. There was no one in my community from the Omaha tribe, from my community, who could teach me what that meant. I went north and found it from my Ojibwe relatives. And the instructions that I came away with is what helped me. And if you know anything about Native people, we don't always like to write everything down. It has to be passed down through ceremony. And when we're constantly in ceremony, this is how knowledge is shared. So, but to have something written down sometimes, in this white man society now, that's how we have to learn. Because we've been conditioned to believe that way. Because we don't get to always be in ceremony. So, becoming a warrior woman, again, it wasn't something I had expected, but it was something that I had to learn to understand how to live by. So I'm going to read something to you, but that was given by this man. His name's Terrence Nelson from Russo River First Nations in Canada. And these are Ogichida. They say Ogichida, not Akichita. They say Ogichida instructions. So the most important rule is to guard your mind. Your loyalty to your people is constantly under attack by outside sources, other people, newspapers, radio, television, schools, magazines, books, and other printed material. These carry messages. Do you understand how much you are influenced by other people's beliefs. Think about that, because what it means, it's not only applies to us as Native people, it applies to everyone. And to white people, you have been colonized and conditioned too. You can undo that if you choose to do that. So you are being conditioned every day of your life. You have been conditioned from the day you were born. Do you understand what and who conditioned you to think in the manner you are now thinking? You cannot regain control of your independence of thought until you understand your programming. The conditioning from other people's values and beliefs that occurred from the day you were born. That applies to each one of us. So, when you guard your mind from negative people, things, and thoughts, you seek Creator's instructions. Remember your own instructions. Work every day. Be grateful for every day as a gift from the Creator to do your work. Honor is the highest value. You represent your people. Do not disgrace yourself. Your children, your grandchildren will learn from you. To have your memory honored by your descendants is the only reward of value for an Ogichida. Many Ogichida died in battle, defending to the death the honor of the Native people. Walk with pride on the accomplishments of your people, but remember your loyalty must be to your children. This is what I live with every single day. Every day. I don't have to read these instructions. It's already here now in my memory. It's in my DNA. Who's my loyalty to? To my children, but also to other children, to all children. So in other words, my loyalty is to the future. It's not to no government, politicians, preachers, whomever the like. It's to the future. That is why I do what I do. So, I want to also share something about, I called it paddles and peace medals. Paddles and peace medals. These are metaphors. Calling my daughter forth to hold my things. Pulling out my bag of tricks. As a teacher, I always have a bag, so I always say that to the kids. I got my bag of tricks, so my repertoire, what I'm going to entertain them with. Because as a teacher, that's how I see myself. I'm an entertainer. I got to keep them engaged and happy and, keep them going because this is what they want, right? They want to learn. Well, if you're going to teach, you got to make it fun and funny. But in this metaphor, I got my paddle. This paddle I got out in California about 3 years ago. But the paddle came from one of the tribes in California. How do they live? They live on the ocean, right? The paddle represents for them is a way of life. They're paddling in their canoes, their big boats that they have, that they make. This is representative of who they are. They gave it to me and I was like, okay. They told me, put whatever you want to put on there. So this is how I looked at it. I thought, okay, I don't even know what to put on there yet, but I will. But I keep it as a reminder because this is something, again, that represents who we are. I feel like it's an honor. They gave me a paddle. One day I will do that. Maybe I'll be building my own canoe like we used to. go around in canoes like we did. Peace medals. What did the peace medals mean when they gave them to the Indians? Means we were happy and we were like, we wanted to be part of the government, right? And I know a lot of ancestors of ours have peace medals. Well, I was given a peace medal recently, and this one is of Standing Bear. And it was for, of course, that story that they did about my life recently. That's a part of my life, a part of who I am. So I received a peace medal. And I thought, wow, okay. I too will keep this, as a memory, as a metaphor, just like the paddle, to remind me. Kind of like both. It's an honor, but at the same time, what does it also mean? I know what Standing Bear stood for. I come from the Sanssouci family. Some would say the Sanssouci clan. I don't know how many of us there are. There's over 300 of us, as far as I know. We're kind of our own clan, like I said, because we're a bit different from the rest of our Omaha relatives. We don't have a clan, whereas most of the Omahas do. And most of us have horse names, which is kind of unusual too, in a way. Having these two kind of shows me like there's something, it's a reminder. I need to continue to work on things. Whatever that means for me, that's something I'm continuing on in my own path. So paddles, from paddles to peace medals, the metaphors. So I'm going to talk about decolonization. I would say my own awakening that happened. Even though I grew up with American Indian movement, my parents were members of the American Indian movement, even though I had all of that, even though I had a sense of all of that, I was still colonized, so colonized that I can acknowledge that I've been colonized. But I would say 2004 was the year I had experienced so much through the job I was working at with the Nebraska Department of Ed. And I learned. One of my first teachers was Faith Spotted Eagle. She's the one that kind of, like, I guess you'd say, nudged me, got me going. And then I started to realize, you know what, I need to look at this and understand. And then the next person I met was Michael Yellowbird. And Michael Yellowbird wrote a book, co-wrote, I guess, co-edited, put it that way, this book called For Indigenous Eyes Only, a handbook for decolonization. Well, once I got hold of that book, I was like, okay, now I have a good sense of what this means, what this work is about. But to go up on that further, I met a white brother. His name was Christopher Cartmill, and he was commissioned by the Lead Center for Performing Arts to write this play, right, on Chief Standing Bear. And when I met him, we met at the powwow here at the Indian Center, and I was standing there looking at him, like, I was like, why did they commission you, of all people, to write this play about Standing Bear, a white man? We have our own playwrights. You know, that was my first words to him. And he had to learn. We became friends after that point. And we had these continual conversations. And then he saw my book on decolonization when he came to visit me and my family. And he didn't understand what it meant. What he thought was that it meant that we were on this path, or that Native people wanted to ship him back home to Europe. That's what he thought decolonization was. In a way, I guess you could say that would be kind of like a native's dream, right? Ship everybody back. Europe, take your people back. They're messing everything up over here. So, in this way, we use humor. Humor is our way. It's been our way of coping and a way of survival. So he asked me questions over that course of, that year that we spent nearly all the time in conversation. And he asked us questions. Just like what is being asked today by the non-native people, by the white people, as we say. Lakota say wasichu, Omaha say wache ama, or haska, nyashinga. That question was, how can I help? What do we need to do to help you? This was my answer. This was my answer to him when he asked. I said, just get out of our way. We're working. We want to save our languages. We want to learn our ceremonies. We want to do all these things. And that was kind of the response too. Was like, just get out of our way so we can do our work. Stop trying to stop us. Stop assimilating us. We've got a lot of work to do. That was my answer to him. He put it in his book. So there's another part that goes to this. Again, out of my bag of tricks here. If you know anything about Native people, then you know that we have a lot of prophecies. These spiritual prophecies were told to us even before white people arrived on these shores. We were already prepared. A lot of us came from the East Coast. If you know that, if you know anything about history, my people, the Omaha people, we were part of the Degi-Ha people, a larger group, before we split into smaller tribes. The Degi-Ha were all along the East Coast. And we were told, probably about 1,200 years ago, I would estimate, we were told to leave the East Coast. There was a huge grand council of all the tribes along the East Coast. And we were told, because it was foretold of what was coming. Those agreements were made way back then. Some agreed to stay and take the brunt, as they say, and the rest of us moved inland. Further inland, because we were going to be dealing with genocide. That's what we were told. I'm telling you now because in all the prophecies that we were given back then, this is the time we're living through now. Some of the people of Turtle Island called us the seventh fire. We're living in the seventh fire. And they say, we are the people we've been waiting for. So in the seventh fire, there are two roads. And I'll read something out of this book called the Mishumas book. The Mishumas book was written by Eddie Benton Benet. He was the Grand Chief of the Three Fires Society. So in that part, what was shared about that prophecy was that it says the seventh prophet at that time that came to the people, because there were 7 prophets that came to the people during that time when we were living on the East Coast. So he was young and had a strange light in his eyes. His eyes were so bright no one could look at him. Said, in the time of the 7th people, a new people will emerge. They will retrace their steps to find what was left by the trail, meaning what we were forced through colonization and assimilation to leave along the trail, us Native people. Their steps will take them to the elders, who they will ask to guide them on their journey. But many of the elders will have fallen asleep. They will awaken to this new time with nothing to offer. Some of the elders will be nothing. Some of the elders will be silent out of fear. Some of the elders will be silent because no one will have asked anything of them. But the new people will have to be careful in how they approach the elders. The task of the new people will not be easy. So, if the new people remain strong in their quest, everything will begin to be rekindled. So it's in this time of this prophecy that it says, in this time, the light-skinned race that came here to these shores will be given a choice between 2 roads. If they choose the right road, then the 7th fire will light the 8th and final fire, an eternal fire of peace, love, brotherhood, and sisterhood. If the light-skinned race makes the wrong choice of roads, then the destruction which they brought with them in coming to this country will come back to them and will cause much suffering and death to all of Earth's people. This is one of the prophecies, and we're seeing it. So 2 roads. Think about that. You have a choice. Our white relatives, which road are you going to choose? And I think it was appropriate that, I think someone had written in about, that work that you had done yesterday, was that, about the poem? And somebody had made a comment through the Lincoln Journal-Star and said that this work that Standing for Nebraska was leading down to the path of destruction. And I thought that was really interesting, and I thought, they must know this path already because they're talking about it. But again, it's like, according to our prophecies, the path of destruction is being brought by the white-skinned people, the lighter-skinned ones, not by us. We're doing whatever we can to save Mother Earth, to save Turtle Island. And we're tired because we've been doing this work since, how many? 500 plus years now. So we have an opportunity here. You, the light-skinned race, have an opportunity to learn, grow, and change. So when we say leave us alone, we're saying leave us alone so we can maintain our spirituality, our ceremonies, our languages. Because I get tired. The hope for the future. But I get resentful because here I am again at another rally speaking about this work. And I'm tired. What would I rather be doing, do you think? I'm a teacher. I've been trained to be a language teacher. I want to teach our languages to our children. That's what I want to be doing. I don't want to be standing here fighting for our rights again and again and again. But then if that's what I'm called to do, then so be it. So my resentment drains away because I feel like, okay, all right, here I am again. Let's carry on. All right, let's get going. So the resiliency is the hope. Keep going forward, because this is what our children are depending on us for. We can't stop. The fight is not over. And we are still here. We are going to continue to do this work. And we want to make something better for all our children. Something better. Something good. And those who are white supremacists or whatever they call themselves, get over yourselves, because you're going to die too if you don't change. Amen. Heal and grow and learn. That's my message to you. I'm not saying die. We want you dead. I'm not even saying that. I'm saying heal, grow, and change. Learn. So, Sarah, listen. I can go on and on and on, like, like anything. But then, what does it mean? We're all tired, we're hungry, probably gotta go to the bathroom, So I'll leave it at that. But I wanted to share that with you, this message. Be hopeful. Regain your strength. Take this message, all our messages, take it with you and do something. Rethink, redo, whatever it is that, everybody does as educators. Like I said, I'm an educator, but I'm also a carrier of something here, responsibility. And let's go forward. Do something good. Make something good for the future. That's what I do as a warrior woman. That's my responsibility. Thank you. Ewe de wongire. Mitaku yasin.
Thank you all for coming out today and for being warriors with us in this cold. I know this has been really hard. I hope you're all doing okay. We're going to close things out here with a song.
Can you hold that? Up that song.
Oh, and just one last thing here. We're going to have some food at the Indian Center, probably, I don't know, within an hour or so, I would think. So if you want to stop by, please do. Please join us for some deer soup and some fry bread and a few other items of food that we'll be bringing there. So thank you.
Real quick. I think my brothers and sisters are forgetting one simple thing. When we close something, we usually do in prayer then song. So all of you, join hands right here. Come on, hold hands. While these ones are sitting here, come up there. Put your hand on their shoulder. If you're afraid, just put it shoulder. Come on. Bring your Zachary Bear Heel sign too. Come on, join over here. The one over there is putting the sign down. Come on. The brother. Come on.
Put your hand on his shoulder. They were connected.
Mitaki pilena le woche ki wakahi ki le wo yukchan ki le eagna ka ki wo pila tranki chicha na khoto gna. So what ki ki le dona hunch oyaki hipi. Wo yukchan le net khokata kya. To han oyate ki zania umpikte hena etcha wable zekilena ospicha kyokte. Ne chuha tako hena wola khote chetke enazi pikte ki chante ogna hetis e chumpo. Ole wochiki hene chichote. Aho! Okay. O tronkashelo akantranka. Kichi maneto. Ampeto astele. On hiuta kam na on hina zipiki woki kile. Oyate chipi. O yunkha lena ptala on hina zim natako o aste iwonglakob. Nie et chetkia wahochiche. Natona hoch isha tiwahe tropiki kakishab na iotiekiab. Na hoch isha maza tipi unsha tiopa ke hena kakchan yanka ke hena kiksu icha. Na hoch hena isha tagani yutaf ni leon petoki hochichapi. Na unchi makaki anaw te akhpapiko. Dona hoch letsu se orate ki hipi na taku waste chupik tacha. Hena esha ne hochiche. Trokel ne toa Wichoni ekik na kineel chetkia hena glimpi. Te etaha tako eprekile o ashte uyak upiki woki ki hena echela onkiulapi. Na wakhanska kichi mane tu ne cha wichoni ki lena uyak upi. Ke hun hechus e woki onkiulapi. Na thatia topo o makhanska ki hena ahito api en onkiapi. Na ake hun hena chankugna kigleki akte. Trea hun hena hipi na isha woki hena chimpi. Awai chalaka na etaha taku washte lena. Kigleki api washte e chunkte. Kia hechus e hochi chapi. Oh, metaki api. For the brother that mentioned all the things about the incarceration rate, we're going to close it off in honor of all the people that are still political prisoners, like our brother Leonard Peltier. And this is a song we're going to use for everybody. So come on, join the drum. Stand around it. Come on. Beautiful. Sing along. This song was made by Dennis Banks many years ago in honor of Leonard Peltier. And my sister mentioned, she mentioned the Ojibwe people. And that's where that song was originated, up there in, I think it was in Red Lake or Leech Lake, one of the two, where Dennis was from. So without any other delay of this understanding, we're going to honor all the people and that brother that was mentioning, all the incarcerated brothers and sisters. Sometimes we do forget that when we get into talking. So this is the song we're going to honor them with. Wait! What do we do? Follow you guys?
Thank you.